Thanks for joining us here on 9 News Plus. I'm Chris Bianchi. The World Cup gets underway on November the 20th, and the U.S. plays its first game on Monday, November the 21st, against Wales at noon Mountain Time. But this World Cup is not without some serious controversy. It's widely known that the host country of Qatar bribed soccer's governing body, FIFA, in order to host the tournament. Human rights groups say that hundreds of people died to build World Cup stadiums, and beer sales got outlawed inside stadiums, a move that was only announced a few days ago. I spoke with David Moore from the 18.com. He actually just went to Qatar about this World Cup and all the controversy surrounding it.
We're now joined by David Moore, an associate writer from the 18.com. David, thanks so much for joining us here on 9 News Plus today.
Oh, yeah. Pleasure being here. I'm excited to talk about it. Super amped for the World Cup, obviously.
Me too as well. I'll be the first to admit I'm a diehard soccer fan, so I'm going to be watching. I'm going to be pretty useless at noon during those games, at least the noon Mountain Time games. You spent some time in Qatar before the World Cup. Before we kind of get into some of those games on the field, could you tell us a little bit about what your experience was like in Qatar and what we can expect there?
Yeah, so I spent about a week in Qatar. I was with a group that was traveling, looking at a lot of the cultural sites at Qatar, museums. We went to one of the stadiums as well. And well, for starters, I can say it was so hot. I don't think I've ever been that hot in my life, even though it was in November. When I went, it was end of October, early November. It was so hot. But I will say it was overall pretty positive experience in Qatar. The people there were incredibly friendly. In terms of like safety, I definitely felt safe at all times. It was definitely an interesting trip. I don't travel all that much, but it was, I enjoyed it, to say the least. But it's hard to enjoy something like that when you know all the controversies surrounding it.
And speaking of which, I kind of want to briefly address that because it's getting so much attention. How do you think organizationally this World Cup is going to go? Because I've heard and seen things online about tents being used and it being likened to a fire festival in World Cup. And again, I don't know. I know you were there 3 weeks ago. Beers getting banned at the stadiums. Is this thing going to be a mess, or how do you anticipate it going?
I'm not going to lie. I have a lot of anxiety about how it's going to go. I'm sorry, but if you are snubbing one of your biggest sponsors, Budweiser, 2 days before the kickoff, they've banned beer being sold in the stadiums and around the stadiums. It'll only be in the FIFA fan zones. That, to me, signals something's not right, that you don't have everything in place. And I know when I was there, I saw you could not go on any street corner without seeing construction. They are definitely in hyper mode to get everything ready for all the visitors. And I've seen those videos of the tents, the tent fan zones. I worry about the fire festival likeness of this. And I do fear that I feel like we're going to get one big story of like an incident off the field, because soccer fans, football fans are some of the most passionate and emotional people. And for those who've seen the clips of the big tent villages, what happens when one fan returns from the FIFA fan zone? Let's say, for sake, it's an England fan and their team just had a big victory and they are situated in a tent next to a Welsh fan, an American fan, and they start rubbing it in their noses of like, my team won, your team lost, haha. And what is the security going to be like? What is the safety going to be like in place at those big tent fan villages? And I worry that we're going to get an incident, and I hope not for the sake of everyone's safety, but we'll see.
Yikes. Well, I'm with you, David. I certainly hope that that's not the case. I think nobody's rooting for that to be the case because we're all just excited about the soccer aspect of it. But it feels a little bit unfair to not bring it up at the very least with all the controversy that seems to be surrounding not only the set itself. Obviously, it's pretty well known at this point that Qatar bribed its way to be the host of the 2022 World Cup, and it also seems to be proliferating off the field as well. But with that said, I kind of want to move on to the games itself. This World Cup again starts on Sunday, November the 20th. Qatar hosting Ecuador. The U.S. plays Wales in their first game at noon on Monday, noon Mountain Time on Monday, in their opener before taking on England, then Iran. I'm going to start things off by asking you about the U.S. It's a young team, but they struggled in some recent friendlies. What would you consider to be a good result for this U.S. team in this World Cup?
I think the ceiling for this team would be a quarterfinals appearance. I think in my mind, that's the furthest this team will go, because when you get there, you're probably going to play a Brazil and an Argentina. And this U.S. team just doesn't stack up against those kind of teams. But I think that would be super exciting to make it that far. I think obviously the basement is not making out of the group. You have very talented England and Wales side and Iran. Obviously, they have a lot going on off the pitch, but on the pitch, this Iran team has been pretty good. And so none of these teams are going to be an easy win for the U.S. And so I think the ceiling will be quarterfinals. Realistically, what I think this U.S. team can do, I think they could maybe finish with 4 points in this group with perhaps a win against Iran, a draw against Wales. And this England team is really good. It'll be very fun to watch this U.S. team.
And this is a very young U.S. team as well. Is this a team that's maybe got a team that could come into its prime more for the 2026 World Cup?
Absolutely. The U.S. is the second youngest team at the tournament. Only Ghana has a younger roster. I think the average age is 25. So it's crazy that these guys are basically my age going into this. And so on the biggest stage, you only have one player on this roster who's played at a World Cup before, DeAndre Yedlin. So all these guys, this will be their first time on the biggest stage. And the biggest stat that I feel like a lot of people don't talk about, this U.S. team doesn't win when they don't play at home. Since 2021, when qualifiers started, the U.S. has played 10 games away from home. They've won one, which was the qualifier in Honduras. Other than that, you have 5 draws and 4 losses, whether on neutral or away sites. And I feel like people don't bring that up that much. And I wonder why, because that's a significant thing if your team can't win when they're not at home, because obviously the U.S. will have a lot of away support in Qatar, but you won't be at home. And so that does worry me. That's one stat that looks out to me.
Certainly does. That's quite striking that only one win in their last 10 away games. I guess also as well, final question, I suppose, on the U.S. side for me is that they'll be taking on Wales in their first game. And they're really kind of jumping right into it because I think you kind of alluded to it a second ago. That's, I think, generally perceived as a team they're going to be battling with for that second spot in their group to potentially get out of it and make it to the round of 16, right?
Correct. Yeah, I think it's Iran. No, don't sleep on Iran. They definitely have talent, but I think a lot of people look at it. England is going to get that first spot, and it'll be between Wales and the U.S. to get the second one.
Okay. So with that said, let's move on to maybe some other games, some opening round games in the group play. As a reminder, by the way, it's got those 8 groups of 4. The top 2 teams in each of those groups gets out and moves into the round of 16, and then it's knockout style. But in terms of those opening round games, they'll be going on for, I believe, the first 2 weeks of this tournament. Any big matchups that you got kind of marked down on your calendar? I know you'll be watching everything, but any particular ones that excite you?
Anything Argentina does. Obviously, Argentina, Mexico will be super exciting. I know there's a lot of support for Mexico and the U.S. as well. And that's kind of an interesting thing where the U.S., Mexico are big rivals. But I'm not going to lie, it kind of becomes a solidarity thing where you want your region to do well. So I'll be watching every Mexico game, Mexico, Argentina, Mexico, Poland. I think one of the biggest group games people have their eyes on is Germany, Spain. The date on that one, I can't remember off the top of my head, but Germany, Spain is definitely a big one. And yeah, it'll be every game pretty much, honestly, that I'll be paying attention to. Germany, Spain, every Mexico game. And yeah, those are the big ones for me. Obviously, the U.S. games.
So you mentioned Argentina. Could you give me a group of 4 or 5 teams or so that you would classify in that kind of elite group that could potentially win it all?
Yeah, in my mind, I think there are 4 or 5 teams that'll win it. It's Argentina, who are my personal favorites to win. I think Argentina is going to win. But up next is Brazil. Those 2 teams were so dominant in their qualifying, and they're on another level. With them, defending champions France, they have some injuries, but I think they're up there. England as well. I think England has the talent to make a very deep run. And my 5th team, who we'll see, is Germany. They're dealing with a couple injuries, and they're kind of a younger squad. They've got a mix of youth and veteranness, but those are my big 5. Brazil, Argentina, France, Germany, England. Those are my 5.
And you said it that Argentina is your pick?
Argentina is definitely my pick. I feel like it's written in the stars that Lionel Messi is going to go out on top.
And just for those of you who might be a little unfamiliar, Lionel Messi, 35 years of age, which is old for a soccer player. I think it's safe to say this is very likely, almost for sure. I think he's already said that this is his last World Cup, right?
It'll be his final one.
So it'll be his final one. He probably wouldn't play at 39 anyways. So Lionel Messi, widely considered to be the best of all time, playing his final World Cup. And He has never won that for Argentina, and Argentina has not won since 1986. Is that correct?
Yes, 86 in Mexico. It's been a long time coming for Argentina.
And for South America too. They have not had a champion since 2002 when Brazil won, right?
Correct. Yeah, so
So
I was 3 years old when Brazil won. So in my lifetime, basically, I cannot remember a time a South American team won. So it's definitely been a long time for CONMEBOL, which is the name of the region they play in.
that is striking indeed, especially with how much I think the world tends to think about soccer being pretty centered in Brazil, Argentina, and South America. I guess my final thing, David, is if you wouldn't mind talking about the18.com, because you guys are locally based. You're based out of Boulder, is my understanding.
Yep. Yeah, we're in Boulder, on Folsom Street, right by the university. And yeah, the 18, definitely a very unique website, if you will, where we are the largest soccer only website in the United States, where we don't cover basketball, NFL. We might touch on some of those topics where if we might compare Super Bowl to World Cup. But yeah, the 18 only focuses on soccer. That's kind of, where soccer lives is the 18, kind of our little catchphrase. But no, we are just big, huge soccer fans, and we just want to bring that kind of American voice to soccer, because a lot of these bigger media companies, you'll get a goal.com or something like that, where they'll be based overseas. But the 18, we try to bring that American voice into it and that American perspective. So obviously we're very excited that this World Cup, we actually have a U.S. team to support, but we're very big on the U.S. men and U.S. women's team. Honestly, we like the U.S. women's team a lot. And so we kind of put a lot of our stock in them as well. But no, we're just, at the end of the day, just huge soccer fans who love supporting the U.S. and then sharing their stories and news with the world, basically.
A good place to be located soccer wise too, with so many players from the women's side in particular that hail from Colorado as well. So and then you got Ethan Horvath, backup goalkeeper on the US national team, who also comes from Highlands Ranch. So some local ties in there. And David, I think you're one of them, but more importantly, enjoy the World Cup, and thanks so much for joining us here on 90s Plus today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.